Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Tucson Village gathering this morning. Today, our topic is craniosacral therapy, nourishing the mother and baby through all stages of life. And we are honored to have the lovely Tzipora with us this morning. Tzipora has been serving mothers and babies, nourishing them and treating them as the conscious and sentient beings that they are for over 2 decades, which doesn't seem possible, Tzipora. She is passionate about women's health care and individualizing care to each woman's specific needs. She's now retired from her years as a licensed midwife in Oregon, and she settled into Tucson's beautiful Sonoran Desert, where she continues to work with families in the peri and postnatal periods through her work as a craniosacral therapist. She also integrates a variety of modalities to support the whole being on many levels. And she's honored to continue supporting women, babies, and families during this really incredibly sacred time in their lives. So without further ado, welcome, Tzipora. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Take it away.
Thank you, Sarah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so wonderful to be here with this beautiful village that's gathered. It's such a, just such a lovely venue that you've put together here and platform where we can come together and learn from one another and share. And yeah, I'm really grateful to this organization and what you've put together here. And thank you for that introduction. Yeah, so the virtual presentation, it's a new venue for me, so I'll do my best.
You've got this.
So you introduced me really lovely, very, I'm just going to fill in a couple more gaps and share a little bit more about myself before we jump in. I'm so excited to talk about craniosacral therapy today. It's one of my life passions. I took my very first craniosacral class in 2005 when I was living in Prescott at the time and going to massage school at the time, and fell in love with it and realized I don't want to do massage. I want to do craniosacral therapy. That's what I want to do. So I didn't complete massage school, and I continued on my path as continuing craniosacral trainings over the years and doing working with whoever I can get my hands on, really. And continued my journey onto Oregon, went to midwifery school, and started practicing as a midwife, both in private practice, group practice at freestanding birth centers, as well as attending home births. I think I attended just under 300 births in my 13 years of practice. And throughout that time, I was lucky enough to incorporate craniosacral therapy throughout all of those years for my mamas and babies. So I was very lucky to be able to see the direct effects that it had both in the prenatal, postnatal, and for infants for a variety of reasons. And we'll talk all about that today. In addition to my years as a midwife, as well as my craniosacral path, which for those of you who are interested in my training, I've studied under both the Upledger Institute, Biodynamic Institute, as well as with some teachers, Carol Gray namely, who is a wonderful resource. And if you ever have the chance to study with her, she's based in Portland, Oregon, and she teaches classes prenatal, postnatal, and infant specific craniosacral therapy. And she's been a body worker for over 30 years, as well as a retired midwife. So she was who I was looking for, and I found her. Anyway, So in addition to that, I also have many years of study and apprenticeship, both informal and informal study of herbalism, specifically in women's health and children. No children of my own, but fur babies. And yeah, and so in my practice here in Tucson, I'd say 90% of my clients are infants and mamas. But I also work on all populations, but that's definitely the population that I love supporting and working with, and that I feel like I could really offer and contribute to. Children of all ages as well. Even toddlers that are wiggling and crawling all around the room. We just get on the floor and play, and I work with however they'll let me work with them. Yeah, so what is craniosacral therapy? Let's start there. And Sarah, what is, just to check, what is my time check? I want to set a little timer for myself so I could pace myself appropriately.
Sure, sure. Megan is able to also give you some timers,
Okay.
some time checks, but you have until about 11:10 or so.
Oh,
so
perfect.
You
Okay.
have quite a bit of time.
Great.
So go at your own pace.
Wonderful. Okay, I won't rush through it then. So craniosacral therapy. So just a little overview of how we'll be organizing today. First, I'm going to talk about craniosacral therapy. What is it? How does it work? I'm going to talk a little bit about its roots, its history, where it came from, and then what does a session look like? Who it's appropriate for, the benefits, are there any contraindications, and then we'll open it up for questions. So craniosacral, it's a gentle, non-invasive type of bodywork, and it works by gently creating space, removing any restrictions and tension throughout the body, namely to the vital flow or cranial rhythm and movement of the cerebrospinal fluid. The cerebrospinal fluid bathes our cranium, our spinal cord, and during a treatment, I'm tuning in and assessing into these fluids of the body. I'm also tuning into the fascia and noticing any patterns and the structure and how we hold ourselves. But I'm mostly working with the vital flow, the cerebrospinal fluid. And this technique, it takes stress off of the nervous system, having a calming and balancing effect on the body and the mental state. The craniosacral touch is so gentle and so light. It's about the weight of a nickel to a dime at max, making it an appropriate modality for all populations. So from infants to the elderly, those suffering with conditions, to those just wanting to maintain their health and immunity. So during a treatment, you remain clothed on a table for adults, and for infants. I'll talk specifically what that session looks like for them when I talk about what a session looks like, but those sessions are typically more fluid. I don't lay them out on a table usually. All of our body parts should move independently of one another, of all of their neighbors. So when they don't, pain or loss of function can follow. And the goal of this work isn't to necessarily put our bodies back into a particular alignment, but more to improve our mobility. In the presence of mobility, our bodies could find their own natural alignment and structural balance. So this work, there's no big structural adjustments, very gentle holds. And so coming back to how it works on the nervous system, this is really big nervous system work. So it's addressing and working directly with our vagal nerve and our vagus system here. And so anytime we experience a trauma whether it's emotional, physical, and what is a trauma? It could be anything from a car accident to a surgery to a really hard birth experience to getting into a verbal confrontation with somebody. It's really any stressor on the system that ignites a parasympathetic response, putting us into a fight or flight mode. So this work helps the body to go into an emotional release, as we can store these life experiences, these traumas in our bodies. And because these techniques are so gentle and subtle, but powerful, the effects could go deep without stimulating the body's defenses. And so by allowing the body to have this somatic experience, and it helps to unlock and facilitate this process of release and quieting the nervous system. And that's one of the integral parts of craniosacral work. And some people describe, so how does craniosacral therapy feel? That's a big question I get. Some people describe it as they feel like they're floating in water, or they feel like you were working on my head, but I felt it in my pelvis or in my foot, or I'm not sure what you were doing. You were just holding my head, but all of a sudden I had all this movement in my digestive system, because it's all connected and all the fluids and all parts of our bodies are working together. Where does craniosacral therapy come from? So it comes from osteopathic roots, and it evolved as a specialized branch of osteopathy. It was developed in the US by Andrew Taylor Still, and it was developed as a form of non-invasive manual medicine that focuses on total body health, including the body's structural organs, nervous, circulatory, and lymphatic systems. Initially, osteopaths were not concerned with structures in the cranium because they were taught, and this is what's usually taught in the US, that all of our cranial bones fuse at some point in our lives, and that our heads don't have movable joints, kind of like coconuts. But as the cranial work evolved in the later years of cranial osteopathy, the early cranio osteopaths like William Sutherland and Charlotte Weaver disagreed with the head as a coconut model. And they began to develop assessment and treatment techniques that focus on what we now call, within the craniosacral world, the CS system, which encasts the membranes, the fluids and bones that surround, nourish, and protect and support the brain and spinal cord. So they noticed that not only were the cranial bones slightly movable, but that they also had a palpable rhythm of their own. And we now call this, in the craniosacral world, the CS rhythm, the craniosacral rhythm, or the cranial rhythmic impulse. So that's one of the assessment tools I'm using when I'm working on a baby or a mama. I'm, looking for any slight overrides. Are there any sticky parts that aren't quite moving? Everything should move slightly independently of one another. So again, craniosacral is beneficial for all age groups and conditions, from severe ailments and accidents to preventative care. Regular sessions can help to maintain health, well-being, and immunity, as well as ward off depression and stress, help to lower and work with anxiety. as well as musculoskeletal dysfunction. So when our cerebrospinal fluid is all flowing like it should be, this helps to reduce inflammation in the body. So it's effective, again, for treating trauma or restrictions in the body, whether from a challenging birth to a physical injury or emotional shock to our nervous system. We talked about how the body goes into fight or flight mode. And, you know, the sooner that restriction is released in the body, and that could be addressed from the somatic work, the easier and faster the healing process. So how would this be helpful in pregnancy? So, well, first let's start, we can talk about preconception. So preconception, if somebody is, you know, for, you know, just creating flow and, oops, sorry, my computer's doing something funny here. Can everyone still hear me? Okay, perfect, great. All right, preconception, this would be a wonderful, wonderful tool to help find balance and alignment in the pelvis. Make sure that, you know, if there are any restrictions or any like round ligaments, you know, and anything that's not quite balanced, you know, through the pelvic womb work that, you know, I incorporate into the work I do, it could be really, really helpful in just making sure that the body is in a state of homeostasis, which can help to just make sure that the body is in a space of alignment and just helping to lower our stress levels. Really, that's one of the main goals, working directly on the nervous system, because stress could do, as I'm sure you're aware of, stress can do remarkable things to the body. And I'm sure we can see from a lot of our mamas that our immune function and our bodies are working at an optimal level when the lower our stress levels are. So this is a wonderful tool for that. In pregnancy, craniosacral could be a really wonderful tool, you know, going into a pregnancy, helping to incorporate or release any hard outcomes from previous births, any fear, any trauma in the body, any old stories that got stored into our psyche or experience, just really helping to release those, as well as, you know, any poor outcomes, such as miscarriage or loss, you know, any experience of just not healing well in the previous postnatal time. So, you know, it could really.
Can I ask a quick question from Facebook?
Sure. Yes.
And it ties into the pregnancy time frame.
Yes.
And I would suspect maybe changes postpartum or for different stages of life. How many sessions would you typically see a person going to for CST treatments?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I imagine that might be a little bit fluid depending on, right, but like what situation you're in, what
Sure.
your current stress levels are,
Mm-hmm.
how you're processing things in your life. Can you maybe speak to that, especially as it pertains to pregnancy? Because I'm interested in, I guess my deeper question would be, have we seen better outcomes within a labor and delivery if we are being consistent with CST during our pregnancies?
Yeah. That's a great question. And so it's very individualized depending upon what's going on with with each person. But what I would say, kind of as a baseline for someone who is just like, I feel pretty okay, just have all those, normal pregnancy discomforts and, oh, I had a growth spur and my round ligaments acting up and my low back's a little achy. Monthly would be ideal. And it also comes down to finances too, right? Like that, and that's a very real part of life. So I have some clients that see me monthly. I have some clients that want to see me weekly, and I have some clients that see me trimester by trimester. Now, if there's a bigger picture going on, like an old injury going into a pregnancy that's activated, and we're getting good results from craniosacral, I say come as often as you can and we'll work out some financial plan that works for you, because this is helping and I want to make this work for you. Does that answer the question? Okay, perfect. Yeah, so, and the same to be said for postnatally. Postnatally, I see mamas the day after the birth. I mean, it's, sometimes and I also do home visits here in Tucson, as well as have a home office. And sometimes I'll go over within that, that first week really is ideal. That's an ideal window to just help the body to integrate the experience, help the pelvis and all the bones to realign. Yeah, it's there, the sooner the better, really. Yeah. So, not only is it helpful in releasing restrictions in the pelvis so that the baby can assume an optimal fetal positioning. So this is another thing. So optimal fetal positioning, what is that? That's baby moving into that LOA position, that left occiput anterior position, that position that we want babies to be in those last weeks of pregnancy, that help to make a easier, right, in quotations, delivery for both mom and baby. Less work that they have to do to make their way through the pelvis. And it's this is one of the things that craniosacral could help with, because in this work, I'm looking for any restrictions in the pelvis. What balancing do we need to do? We create space so that your baby has more space to move about and move down in the direction that they need to. And I'm lucky enough because I have palpation experience from midwifery, and so it really informs what's going on with baby here. What position is baby in here? And I don't palpate everybody's baby, and I'm not making grand diagnoses or anything, but it helps to inform the direction that I go in and the work that I do. So that's one of the beautiful benefits of this work, is helping baby to move into that optimal fetal position. And so it's also really nice when where mamas, as their bellies are growing, to integrate, that round ligament pain. Make sure, sounds like most people here are in healthcare, so you kind of have an idea of those round ligaments that suspend the uterus, and they're pretty thin, right? I mean, so one little to the left or right, that could cause a lot of discomfort. Whether it's in our sacroiliac joint, in our SI, in our low back, to the pubic bone and in the front, to hip pain. Sometimes that can contribute to, shooting pains down the legs. So I'm looking to address that too and help to alleviate some of those discomforts. as well as working on the whole body. It's a whole body treatment. And a treatment also helps to provide a safe and loving touch for mamas, a special time for them to just really carve out some nice self-care where they could really nourish themselves. They could receive some, again, some loving touch, safe touch, where they could let down and take that time to connect into themselves and connect into their infants.
I have a question in the chat for you. Can this work supplement or be in place of aversion? I think she meant inversion. So turning the baby, can this work to help with that if a baby is breech? Tzipora, you froze. We will wait patiently. Hopefully she comes back. Oh, the joys of technology.
It looks like she's thinking really hard about it.
She is just thinking so hard that it just froze her video.
Oh, you know what?
She left.
I think she might jump on.
She'll jump back on. I want to take this moment to encourage everybody, if you're watching on Facebook Live or if you are in our Zoom room, please feel free, put comments in the chat on Zoom or in the comment section on the Facebook Live. We are going to be streaming those to Tzipora so that she can make sure to answer your questions. So if anything comes up, if you're curious, if you need more information about something that she's already spoken about, please don't be shy. Put your comments in there. I know she'd love to answer them and elaborate on them. And we'll just wait for her to pop back on. She had been having some issues earlier with her connection and they were largely fixed. So maybe somebody popped onto her Wi-Fi or something. Here she comes. Here she comes. Hey.
Oh gosh. Okay.
You're good. You're good. It happens.
I created a hotspot, so
oh, cool.
My
okay.
internet is not being cooperative right now.
That's okay, and we all understand. I took the moment to just make sure that everyone knows they can put their questions in the chat or on the Facebook Live in the comments, so we can get those over to you. So just to recap, we were asking about, there was a question in the chat about CST being used as a supplement to, or inversion, so a baby who is breech, right? Can that be used to help that along? So maybe you can share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm not sure, I started speaking about that. I'm not sure if it all got cut off. Okay, you didn't hear any of it? We
didn't hear any of it. I'm so sorry. You were deep in thought like this.
Okay, so great question, and it depends. One, it depends on I think it mostly depends on the situation and also the practitioner's skill level. So preventing and helping baby to stay in an optimal fetal position is ideal, right? I mean, babies can be really in any position they want up until a certain time. But really in those last couple of weeks, we want baby to stay head down. So this work, yes, can help baby stay head down. Now, if a baby should turn or go into a transverse position where they're laying on their side, or if they do a full 360, craniosacral can and is helpful for making space in the pelvis and releasing any restrictions that might be going on in the uterus. However, does that mean that the baby is necessarily going to turn, or that I am skilled enough to actually physically turn a baby? No. I mean, that's something that wouldn't be appropriate to do without, kind of monitoring baby on an ultrasound while that's happening too. However, but it can help to create space within the uterus, within the womb, to help baby move into that position, and as well as probably lower mom's stress levels and how of that worry of, oh no, is my baby going to stay in a breech position, and what does this mean for my birth experience? Yeah.
And I just wanted to add, Tzipora, I had a version with my second, and I think the craniosacral work, I would have tried it first because it's much less invasive and less, there's some discomfort with an external version for sure. So I think that piece of information is good for families to know that they have options, and to think about, and the same as what you just said, if he, which I didn't know if he had flipped again, that's what he wanted to do, and that was that. But we thought we'd try, and he did stay down, and it was, like you said, at 36 and a half or 37, I can't remember exactly. But yeah, so that's a good piece of information. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, Eileen. And, and that's what I would suggest to anybody who is experiencing an acrobatic baby is to try all the things before you go in for a version, because they're not comfortable. I mean, it's rare when I hear from a mom, oh, it was a breeze, no big deal. There's often discomfort with it. It's not and they have risks too. So I often suggest, do the acupuncture, do the, craniosacral, Webster technique, chiropractic. We have studies on moxibustion, the burning of the mugwort that the acupuncturists do, and certain acupuncture points that are very effective. So I would say do all those, use everything in your toolbox before you go in for that. My 2 cents. Yeah. So let's see. Ooh. Okay. So yeah, so we were saying, got a little rerouted with getting kicked off here. So yeah, so I think we covered the benefits prenatally of why it might be and why it is helpful for mamas to experience this work, but also going into the postnatal time. Okay. Of course, when you're making a presentation, your computer decides to be all funky. So in the postnatal time, this work really helps with the realignment of the bones and the tissues, and it helps to restore emotional balance. And it also addresses pelvic floor health. It helps to alleviate the discomforts of newborn care. So those feeding shoulders, whether you're bottle feeding or nursing, you're sitting like this most of the time. So helps to release everything, up here and upward, as well as work on the nervous system, helping to integrate the birth experience. We focus on structural realignment of the pelvis and spine, as well as addressing and looking at the rehabilitation of the muscles that are overworked during the or weakened during the pregnancy and birth experience. And when appropriate, sometimes I'll share exercises that could be helpful for moms for helping to rehabilitate some of those weakened or overworked muscles. Craniosacral balances the emotional system, helping to facilitate integrating the birth experience. So for mamas who have had cesarean births, whether planned or unplanned, or any other unexpected outcomes. Sometimes if a birth goes not according to plan, or what it was hoped for, receiving this work can be really, really helpful to pause and notice changes that have taken place, and, you know, helps to carve out a space for mama to just really have some time for herself, to grieve if she needs to, tell her story, and again, you know, have that somatic experience where you're not using that, you know, the primal cortex part of the brain, and you could just kind of sink and let the body release and let go as it needs to. The sessions are always a place of honoring the right now and being present with that. And, you know, moms are busy, right? You all know, you don't have that time, especially with a newborn. You're so on. So it's, even if you have a beautiful, normal, physiological birth, right? It's still hard and it's still stressful for the body. It's, you know, a marathon plus. So it's a nice place to pause in. Taxing for sure, yes. So for babies, so many reasons, and so wonderful for babies to receive this work. As when babies should receive this work, I think the sooner the better. The sooner the better. Sometimes I'll see babies, you know, 1 day old. Sometimes I see them months out. I mean, really, really, as soon as possible is wonderful, but whenever. Women come see you even. Absolutely. This work is for everyone. It doesn't matter if you've had babies or if you haven't had babies. Yes. 100%. I'm responding to a question in the text box. Can women come 8 years plus a birth experience? Yes. So as babies come through the birth canal, all their cranial bones, you know, get smushed and override, and that's normal. That's the beautiful biological, physiological process of labor, and it works, right? Now, after birth, all those bones are supposed to go back into place where they're supposed to live. But sometimes there are some slight overrides, sticky parts that could interfere with cranial nerve function. It could contribute to suck-swallow reflex. It could contribute, and what does that mean for suck-swallow reflex? So nursing issues, coordinating that suck, tightness in the laryngeal area, the oropharyngeal area. Usually when I see babies that are having issues coordinating their suck, it's often there's tightness in the oropharyngeal area, the hyoid bone here. It's all interconnected, and a session as soon as possible could really, really help to address that. Even babies that latch onto the breast right away and everything's looking wonderful and perfect, still just a really, really nice tune-up to help baby to unwind or do any integration that they need to do. So babies that are having any type of digestive issues, as far as reflux or spitting up, outside of like normal spitting up. Some babies just spit up no matter what, but spitting up after every single feed a lot, craniosacral could really help to work on that. And it's also it could be really helpful for babies that are, that had assistance during delivery, whether it was a C-section birth or assistance with a vacuum or forceps, or just needed extra help getting out. These are babies that are really good candidates for a session. Babies that just seem uncomfortable in their body, that are fussy, and moms that say, they just seem uncomfortable all the time. I don't think this is normal. Those babies could really benefit. Really any issues with nursing, whether it's not opening wide enough, the uncoordinated suck, clicking, not staying latched on, pulling off, arching back, any discoordination, preferring one breast over the other, preferring one side or position over the other, babies that are kind of turned to one side all the time, maybe a picture of torticollis. Those I work on a lot of torticollis babies. What other babies can really, any baby. Anytime that anything is outside of, it's norm, those babies could, really benefit.
Tzipora, I was just gonna, I think you're noticing the chat as well.
Yes.
I was just gonna ask, can you elaborate, because torticollis is quite common, especially when we're seeing breastfeeding concerns and challenges. Can you elaborate on what torticollis is and how CST can help that? As well as elaborate a little bit on this concept of unwinding, because I know that for a lot of people, they don't know a whole lot about CST, but they may have heard that it corresponds with this concept of unwinding, and just kind of elaborate on what that means in the body.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you, awesome.
Sure, I'm just gonna take a sip here, the opportunity. So, torticollis, it's, so there are varying degrees of it, but basically what it is, it's a restriction or tension on one side of the neck or body or area. So, so it could vary from looking like this to this. And it's usually diagnosed by a physical therapist or a pediatrician. A lot of lactation consultants catch it. Chiropractors and craniosacral could be really helpful for this, for just helping to release and those tension patterns and those lines that babies are in, whether it's from in utero. Babies sometimes get in a position that they stay in the whole time that they're comfortable staying in, and they just stay in it. And sometimes it develops in the postnatal time from just a certain position that they're in, or way that they're carried, or sometimes a birth experience could contribute a little bit. Yeah. Unwinding. So how do I talk about unwinding? I could go from like layman's terms to way out there. Anyone who's taken a craniosacral class, they know you can get pretty etheric with it.
Let's go with the layman's terms for now.
That's where I was going. So one of the goals of this work, the two different schools that I studied under, Upledger, which is the craniosacral that a lot of people study under, you're kind of guiding the body into its preferred position, right? Like, okay, you're hanging out way too far to the right, so I'm gonna bring you to the left. And so I incorporate some of that into my practice. But mainly these days, I operate and practice under the biodynamic model, which is more about tuning in and listening to the body of where do you need to go? What's going on for you? Okay, you're hanging out over here to the right. What do you need to do to unwind, to come back to your your point of homeostasis, to unwind this? So during a treatment, I literally will watch people, and sometimes they fall asleep and sometimes they're awake, and I literally watch them do this very subtle, sometimes very pronounced unwinds of kind of dancing through these tension lines and patterns. So it's a literal unwind, really, that I'm just listening and tuning in to where do you need to go? I'm going to guide you there. Yeah. And for somebody who, is skilled in this work and has those subtle palpation skills, they could help take you there. Yeah. The first couple craniosacral classes I took, I think I'm getting this. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it takes years sometimes to develop that. Yeah. And Sarah, I also know that you have an understanding of unwinding. So if there's anything that I'm missing that if you want to contribute to.
Right. I think that's great. I think
Okay,
that's great.
perfect.
Yeah. Thank you so much for addressing that. I think it helps to have
100%.
that kind of basic groundwork knowledge of what you're doing. And by listening, you're really listening through that touch and feeling what's happening within the body. And I'm a little bit geeked out by CST myself. So, yeah, quite partial. I think it's a very just relaxing way of like caring for those needs and allowing for space, not only within the body, like what you're talking about, but just literal physical and emotional, mental space for the individual who's receiving the treatment. It's a very calm process. And so you're just allowed, like you have that permission to just relax, which is what I found when I've had it done is just that analogy to floating in water. It's almost, it really is like, it's almost like that. Maybe out of body could describe it for some, but you really just have this lightness if you allow your body to calm. And that's really what the practitioner is trying to do for you as well, is to allow you to calm, to allow that nervous system to relax. And so, yeah, I super love it.
Yeah.
And I can steal your thunder.
Oh yeah, no, I'm biased too, but that's how I feel about it. And also another note on unwinding. So babies, when they're coming through the birth canal, there's the mechanisms of birth. So, which are very specific to, entering the birth canal in a certain position, whether it's, they're entering in from the right or the left. They have to do a full rotation, depending upon which side they enter in on. They go into flexion, they rotate, extension, and then there's that restitution before birth. Now, this is during a vaginal delivery. Now, for those babies that get stuck, or for those babies that, have a dystocia, that get caught on the inlet or outlet of mom's pelvic bones, and need assistance and don't get to follow their own mechanism of birth, or during a cesarean, these babies, they don't get to do that unwinding that, biologically they're kind of programmed to do. So craniosacral, I create that space for them. Hey, do you need to go through any unwinding? And sometimes I'll watch babies just go through those mechanisms of birth, and I'm just in awe. Every time it happens, it's like, whoa, you just did the full mechanism. Yeah, wow. So really neat. So I want to talk a little bit about tongue tie. And this is, so, okay. The prevalence of tongue tie is on the rise. We see this a lot, right? There's all sorts of reasons and theories why this is happening. And I'm not necessarily going to go down that rabbit hole because that would be a whole another hour I would need. But, you know, so we're seeing more cases on the rise, but within that, we're seeing overdiagnosis, at least from my perspective and from the bodywork world, and, you know, a lot of craniosacral folks, it's the talk within the ones that work with babies, and we call these flaw ties, and they're a little overdiagnosed. And so it's the thing, and there are true tongue ties. There are true tongue ties, 100%. And when babies who need them have a revision done, it works, right? However, for any baby that is having any issue or is, you know, has a anterior or posterior tongue tie, or maybe we're not quite sure if baby has a tongue tie, but they're not opening wide enough and their sucking isn't coordinated and they're not sticking their tongue out past their lips, or we had this tongue tie but didn't really make a difference. We call those flaw ties, like in my little circle of world. So always body work first. Yes, body work first, 100%. Because a lot of the time with these flaw ties, it's an issue of soft tissue restriction, whether it's underneath the tongue here, or the upper labial, or a tight, just the tight pterygoid muscles that, so when I work with a baby, and I have to talk about what a session looks like with a baby, but when I work with babies, I always look in babies' mouths, even if they're not having any issues with nursing, gloved of course, and with the baby's permission, baby-led. And when I'm assessing, are there any soft tissue restrictions, anything that's affecting tongue mobility? I'm looking at the pterygoid muscles here in the back that connect into the jaw that might be interfering with baby opening wide. I'm assessing the palate. Does baby have a high palate, an arched palate? What's baby suck like? Is it not coordinated? Why isn't it coordinated? Maybe it's not coordinated because baby has a restriction in its hyoid muscle here in the neck, or the oral pharyngeal muscle. And often these are connected. Quite often they're connected. Sometimes it's because that there is a cranial override, which could interfere with cranial nerve function, and releasing that wherever it is, whether it's in the parietals or in the occiput or the frontal bone, it's all interconnected. Releasing that could help with that suck swallow reflex. So it's so important if there's any issues with nursing, or if mom's not nursing and baby's having trouble with the bottle, craniosacral, absolutely. And somebody who is comfortable with working on babies, of course. For those of you who aren't based here in Tucson, actually Carol Gray, one of the folks that I've studied with, she has a really good database on her website of people who have studied with her all over the world. So she's a great resource if you're not in Arizona or Tucson, and or if you have moms that, or friends that, I live in California and who could help me here? I'd say anyone who studied with Carol is probably good to go. So after a revision, craniosacral, 100%. I help give parents some exercises to do if baby has a sensitive gag reflex, exercises that are helpful for coordinating that suck swallow reflex, sleepy nursers, sometimes that could be an issue of cranial nerve restriction, but always before and after a revision. Oh, perfect, Carol Gray's website. Let's see here. What else did I want to talk about? And always, I know most of you here work in the field, but any moms who you're working with that are having any issues with feeding, go to a lactation consultant too. Okay, the 11:11 mark. Perfect. Oh yeah, we could all benefit from unwinding after these 2 years, right? Or just being here on this planet, right, in our lives. I get craniosacral regularly. I mean, it saved my life. I mean, yeah, that's a little dramatic. So what does a session look like? So for adults, for non-pregnant people, I usually, depending upon what's going on, I usually have them start face up on a massage table. I have an in-home office here in Tucson, as well as do home visits. You remain clothed during a session. For my pregnant mamas, I have pillows galore here. Usually if I'm going to their home, I have a travel massage table, and since we're at their house, they usually have pillows galore, and I help get them in comfortable positions. And I could work on them sitting up on their side, however they're the most comfortable, depending upon what part of their pregnancy they're in. Postnatally, same, it's a fluid experience. I work for at least an hour on adults, sometimes longer. I offer 75, 90-minute massages. I think for adults, at least 60 minutes is, ideal. Now infants and kids. So in infants or baby treatment, that looks a little different than adults. I always schedule at least 90 minutes. The hands-on work does not take that long for babies. They don't need as much because they're not as deeply patterned as us who have lived in these bodies longer. That's the nice thing about working on babies, is that they release and unwind much faster than adults do. And so the hands-on work for babies lasts anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, but I allot that time for intake and letting moms just share their story, and nursing or eating sessions, because that happens. If the baby will let me, I like to hold them. Sometimes I'll lay them down. Sometimes I'm dancing around them, dancing with them around the room to soothe them and calm them, or, on the birth ball, bouncing them. I like to assess their mouths, what's going on. Again, looking for all those things that I talked about earlier, any soft tissue restrictions, their cranial bones that you could only access through the palate of the mouth, these little tiny bones. And let's see, sometimes babies don't want me to hold them at all, and they're most comfortable on their moms the whole time. And that's fine. I can work on babies while they're eating, while they're in their mom or dad's or other caregiver's arm. It's very fluid with babies. I just kind of make it work. Yeah.
And so for someone who has not experienced CST, what are the areas of the body that you might be touching on either an adult or a baby or a child?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's full body. And so there's like different listening stations, as we call them, on the body, different areas where we could tune into the craniosacral rhythm a little easier. And with adults, I almost always start with the feet, because I use it as an assessment tool of where to go, of reading the body. There's, different ways that I get information from that. So I could be working by the feet, the thighs, the pelvis, the sacrum. There's head work, of course, upper body work. Sometimes it's diaphragmatic on the belly with moms, as prenatal, postnatal. I always work on the belly, tune into what's going on with the round ligament. Is there any round ligament unwinding that we need to do? What's happening in the pelvis? Definitely looking at the sacrum, pubic bone. Babies, it's fluid. I don't have a written construct or formula with them. But typically I start by stabilizing their core, and what that looks like is the lower part of their body, what's going on their sacrum, what's going on in their digestive system and their diaphragm, their chest. I typically work my way up to the baby, but sometimes they're at mom's breast the whole time. So I start by working on their head and just kind of get my hands on them however I can.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Is there anything the mom should look for after the baby has a session?
In the baby, like any presentation of symptoms or changes that might be apparent to the mom after a baby session?
Yeah, that's a great question. So depending upon the reason why a mom came in. So let's say, for example, a mom came in, I saw someone yesterday who, my baby only turns to the left and is really uncomfortable if we try and turn them to the right, and they won't nurse on this side, or, so the advice I gave, watch and see if that positioning has changed at all. And I gave her some exercises to do. And, anyway, after a session, it could take anywhere from the moment after the session to up to 3 days to integrate everything, sometimes longer. So sometimes I see a baby or a mom and right away, I just feel like, I think you're going to need another session. In fact, you might need 3 sessions. And sometimes that's the case. And other times, just 1 session is what someone needs in that moment. So if I don't see these big changes right away, or if I'm working with somebody who has torticollis, or just, a bigger restriction in the body that I just know based off of history, you're probably going to need another session. Then I say, you're probably going to need another session, but watch for any changes. The biggest thing that I hear from moms after a session, and what I usually tell people, is your baby might have a longer nap or stretch of sleep after seeing me. And most of the time, parents are really happy about that. So that's really the biggest thing that I hear or see. I hear a lot, especially my mom, or a full diaper. Yes, because also this is one of the other things for those babies that are like pooping once a week, or like every 3 days, or struggling with elimination. These are the babies that need craniosacral. I like these babies that I work on, the parents, I'm like, text me when they have a poop. I want to know. And it's usually by that evening, and they're like, oh my God, they're pooping. I don't know what you did, but they're pooping again. It's like, well, they had their diaphragm was all restricted, and I don't know, we just made some space. So, but babies, there's a wide range of normal, or there's a wide range of normal with elimination, and some pediatricians will say, oh, it's normal for them to go once a week, but it's not. It's uncomfortable for babies, and they, maybe every other day is okay, but ideally, I mean, every day is, yeah.
So Tzipora, we have a couple more questions coming in the chat. What I'd like to do at this point, in the interest of time, we have about 10 minutes left, in order to allow for more private comments and questions within just our Zoom. I'd like to pop us off of Facebook Live. Before we do that, though, I just want to say thank you again so very much for being here. Thank you. Your expertise is so valuable in all of the fields that we all work in that are on this call today. And I'm sure that everybody on Facebook Live or watching replay will find value in this as well. And I'd encourage you all to look into who's doing CST in your area. Tzipora gave us a great reference on a website to go to find some of those local resources for CST, especially with that one school of thought that she studied under. So that's awesome. She's also putting her information here in the chat for those of you on Facebook Live. And we have you linked on your Facebook page to our live today, or will shortly. Sorry, computer issues. So please feel free to reach out to her through her Facebook, or if you're on our Zoom today and have the information that she's provided, you can do it that way as well. Again, Tzipora is in the Tucson area, serving families down there. So that is a great resource for you to reach out if you would like. Our next village gathering on our virtual platform here will be next Wednesday, September 1st. West Valley Village Gathering is going to be all about exploring the home birth midwifery model of care and what are the ins and outs, what does it look like, how does it compare to other modalities of care in your pregnancy and in your birthing experience. So we hope you'll all join us for that. Our next Tucson gathering will be at the end of September. I believe it's tell me, Eileen, the 22nd. Help me out, someone with a calendar. But it is going to be all about resources led by Easter Seals Blake Foundation. So those of you who are on the call, you're getting the heads up now. If you didn't know already, you may be called on for that.
You're correct. It is the
Am I correct? Woo. All right, September 22nd. So that will be our next time for our Tucson Village Gathering. Not that you can't join our other ones, they're all currently online. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and we'll pop off Facebook Live. Thank you again, Tzipora. And then we will continue